We will now begin with the second presentation titled Family Kin, Availability and Cognitive Impairment, presented by Dr. Nekehia Quashie from the University of Rhode Island. Dr. Quashie, you may begin your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone for the invitation to join the meeting today. I wish I could be there in person. I am Dr. Nekehia Quashie. I'm a professor, assistant professor, more specifically in the Department of Public Health at the University of Rhode Island. Thank you to Dr. Wong for inviting me to the MHAS meeting of users of the MHAS. And I'm going to present work that's in the early stages on family availability and cognition among older adults in Mexico with my colleagues Joseph Science and Jing Zhang, who are both at Arizona State University. I hope it doesn't put us back too much. So I was going to say that we acknowledge funding for the MHAS study, as well as my colleague Joseph received funding from the NIA under an ROO grant. So we acknowledge the kind support from the National Institutes of Health and National Institutes of Aging for this, to support this work. So to start, so in this study, we focus on the availability of partners and children in later life as they are a major source of support for aging adults worldwide. What is generally known is that being unmarried is associated with lower cognitive functioning, and the relationship with being a parent or being childless is a little more nuanced. The health risks of aging with and without children really vary by the cultural and social context. In some societies, being a parent is actually associated with worse health based on measures of physical health and mental health. And at the same time, when we look at cognition, we find that having few and many children in the context of Mexico is also associated with lower cognition. So it's a bit ambiguous whether having children or not would be beneficial for one's cognition in later life. However, there are no known studies that we've been able to find that examine the links between having a partner and having children or not with cognitive functioning. So this combination of partnership and parenthood status is what we are really interested in. So the gap that we intend to address is whether the availability of partners and children is associated with cognitive functioning among older Mexican adults. So why focus on marriage, parenthood, and cognitive functioning? So being married and having children can provide many opportunities for cognitive protection. This includes social interactions with a partner, which is especially relevant on a daily basis, that can stimulate one's cognition and also protect against cognitive decline by having multiple forms of interaction with the partner. And as many people tend to live with their partners, this is greater exposure over the course of one's adult life. There's also more opportunities for social integration because partners and children are sources of social connection to broader communities. So you have more opportunity to expand your social network, which is also shown to be important for sustaining health and well-being. And then partners and children are the immediate sources of support and care in later life. So one would expect that those who are divorced, widowed, as well as persons who have never married would have fewer social networks, fewer potential social supports in later life that could potentially impair health and increase risks for depression and eventually potentially impair cognition. On the other hand, partnership and parenthood can also present stressors. So you can experience social strain if these relationships are of poor quality and not meeting the actual support needs. And then there's potential psychosocial stress from parenting, which can include the demands of parenting, constant management of time that imposes some strain on one's mental health, Additionally, having reduced time during the years of child rearing can reduce the time spent on one's own health and eventually impair cognition. So those are some potential reasons. There's also the potential for social selection, where early life circumstances are really critical to consider as they are very much linked to adult health. So there's quite a bit of research that shows that lower childhood SES and poor mental health and well-being is associated with early parenthood and also large family sizes. And this can increase your likelihood of having more children, less stable partnerships that also impair your health. But then economic and health resources in adulthood also matter. So typically healthier people marry and remain married, which can also increase the potential for pooling of finances, provide more economic security, and support overall health. Higher education, however, is also associated with non-marriage. So there's a ambiguity here that those persons who are more highly educated are less likely to marry. On the flip, we have lower education and SES in adulthood also being associated with having earlier and larger families, but there's also research to support in the context of Latin America that lower education is also associated with childlessness because people may not be able to find partners to enter into partnerships that also bring children. Children also reduce employment and economic resources over time. So this can have implications for wealth accumulation and eventually lead to poorer health over the later life course. In our study, we focus a lot on educational attainment as education generally precedes the partnership and parenthood status. But we also account for early life socioeconomic conditions and health. In the context of Mexico, these topics are really relevant because Mexico is aging fast with an increasing prevalence of dementia, and the family is the main source of support for older adults. So declines in fertility and marriage with rapid population aging make understanding how these family patterns of family availability, are going to be contributing to cognitive health risks. Overall, marriage is normative, but many persons will age without a partner. This is largely due to widowhood, but there are increasing patterns of divorce and non-marriage. And then from the existing research, so far more recent work has shown that separated, divorced women and also widowed men have lower cognition than those who are married. So there's already some suggestion that being unmarried is not so beneficial for one's cognition. And when it comes to childlessness, overall the prevalence is low, but again, with fertility declining and strong cultural norms about relying on children as well as having children in this current cohorts of older adults, childlessness may be a risk factor for lower cognition. And there's some work so far that does show this, that childless older adults, regardless of gender, tend to have lower cognition. But again, the gap is that studies have not looked at this combination of parenthood and partnership status. So we are driven by the questions to find out really, is the availability or unavailability of one or both traditional family ties, that is partner and children, associated with lower cognitive functioning compared to having both ties? And are there gender differences in the association between the unavailability of traditional family ties and cognitive functioning amongst older adults in Mexico? We use data from the Mexican Health and Aging Study. It's nationally representative. Everybody on this call is probably familiar already with the MHAS. We use the 2018 wave of data. We chose the 2018 wave because this is the most recent wave with a refresher cohort. So it's our analyses are then representative of the population 50 and older. Our sample includes 12,694 adults with available data on all the measures that we intend to use in the study. So as an overview for our measures of in the studies, the first I'm going to describe in brief is cognitive ability, which is a measure of which is assessed using 7 different tasks that we use to create a general cognitive ability we use to create a general cognitive ability factor score across these 7 tasks. And then the independent variable married with children is our reference category where we look at the persons who currently have a partner and children. These are then subdivided into unmarried with children, married without children, and those who are unmarried without children, who are, in our view, kinless, as it has been described in previous studies. We control for demographic conditions, early life conditions, respondents' own education, and late life SES, income, wealth, and the availability of health insurance. So I lost some time with the freezing of my screen, so I'm going to move fairly quickly through these results, these initial results we have just descriptively, and I'll give you an overview of the multivariate analyses. So the description of family availability by gender, in summary, most people are married with children, and this is more prevalent amongst men. We have more women who are unmarried with children. It's a higher prevalence for women, 37.6% versus 14.9% of men are unmarried with children. Overall, the prevalence of those who are unmarried without children, that's the kinless, is quite low. It's only about 3% for both men and women. Cognitive ability by family availability for women, on average, unmarried women, have lower cognition scores than those who are married, regardless of the presence of children. When we look at SES by family availability, on average, unmarried and childless women were more socioeconomically advantaged in early life and had more years of education than those who were married with children. Amongst men, there's a less clear and consistent pattern, but on average, unmarried men with children have lower cognition than married men with children. And we see by SES that unmarried men with children have more years of education. Unmarried men without children, sorry, that's what it should be, have more years of education than married men with children, as well as unmarried men with children. But there are no socioeconomic differences in their early life across family availability. In summary, for the multivariate analyses, overall, amongst men, those who are unmarried without children have lower cognition compared to those who are married with children. And comparing men to women, we see that these associations are stronger amongst men. Amongst women, similar pattern, that being unmarried without children is associated with lower cognition. But importantly, comparing Model 1, which controls for family availability, demographic conditions, and early life SES, with Model 2, when we adjust for women's own education, we see a statistically significant association between being unmarried without children and having lower cognition. So what this suggests is that education really plays a role for women's, the association between women's family availability and their cognitive ability. So overall, compared to those married with children, all other family availability groups were associated with lower cognition. Lacking both a partner and children is statistically and significantly associated with lower cognitive ability. And I have to stop soon, but I'll just say that although we see similar net associations for men and women, there are some differences by SES, which is that the absence of both a partner and child was associated with worse cognition for men, but it's not explained by SES. Whereas for women, education may offer some protection for the cognition of unmarried and childless women. So had kinless women not been more socioeconomically advantaged in early life and had more years of education, they would likely have lower cognition than their counterparts who are married with children. And I can go over the limitations and future directions in Q&A, just in the interest of time. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry that I had to be very, very quick at the end.